Welcome to the Daily Fantasy Flex podcast. This is the PGA edition. I am your host, Bryan Mears. I am joined, as always, by my co-host, Colin Davey, and Peter Jennings, a.k.a. CSU Ram 88. In this episode, we are going to recap last week's AT&T Byron Nelson. Definitely an interesting one. It was a weird field and definitely a weird leaderboard up top, but we'll talk about that for a couple minutes, and then obviously we will jump in and talk about this week's DEAN and DELUCA Championship. It is still in Texas, so all the Texas tournaments this summer. Again, I'm joined by Colin and Peter. Colin, what's going on, man?
I'm kind of in breathless anticipation right now about what's going to happen to FanDuel Golf.
Yeah, right.
This week, they've promised some changes. We've been minor critics of the format here and from time to time on the podcast, so hopefully it's moving to a better format, but it sounds like we're not the only one with some issues on it. So I don't know. I have no idea what it's going to go to. Pete, what's your best guess as far as the format? What could they change for you to actually put in some better volume?
I hope that they make it so it's not weird rounds 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 with the format. And, you basically have to pick something that's more like DraftKings. I mean, I think that we want the whole tournament. And, the format currently is structured, basically forces people to play a certain strategy for cash. And then it's kind of a weird game theory for, tournaments. So I hope they go to a more traditional format. So we're just focusing on picking the best golfers and thinking about ownership relative to the whole tournament, not just, this guy's going to be heavily owned rounds 3 and 4, so maybe I'll put him in rounds 1 and 2.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I do want to give some credit. At least they try to do something different.
Yeah,
sure, innovation is always great, but I don't think they appreciate essentially how random a 1 to 2 versus 3 to 4 format is in terms of how much a difference can make when you have someone who just happens to save as good rounds for 1 and 2 versus 3 and 4. It's really more throwing darts at a dartboard than I think they gave it credit for, and that's not translating into the fan experience that everybody kind of intuitively expects with golf. So I think they've gotten the message one way or another. I agree with Pete. I hope they go to a kind of more traditional format. I'm sure there's plenty of other stuff that you can do to kind of do some innovation within the golf product, but hopefully there's something at the other end of the tunnel here.
Yeah, I mean, again, I definitely want to give them credit for trying to be creative and doing something new, and then also we got to give them credit for listening to their customers and changing when there were issues. So we'll see what happens. But Colin, quickly just touching on your thoughts on DJ rounds 1 versus 3, 4. You had mentioned that he might be a better play. He actually outscored his 3-4 pace. He had 48.6 points in rounds 1 and 2, 38.1 if you rostered him in 3 and 4, and he was like 3% in 1 and 2 as opposed to like 80% in 3 and 4. So it may not matter, but I will give you some credit that was a nice call on maybe the game theory shifting towards those guys being in 1 and 2.
All that game theory work apparently thrown out the window because they're changing formats. All 6 weeks of it, or however long it's been with us. So happy to roll with the punches, though, if it means that we're getting a better product in the end.
For sure. Quickly touching on last week, some of the results here. Billy Horschel, obviously, winning the tournament. A nice showing from Jason Day. That was interesting to see. Jordan Spieth, obviously, missing the cut. That was pretty disastrous. We'll talk about him because he is the previous champion for this week and the highest priced golfer. So that'll be an interesting conversation for sure. But yeah, I mean, an interesting leaderboard. Colin, you had a pretty good week. We are going to do a video breakdown of some of our lineups right after this, so be on the lookout for that. But Colin, just quickly touching on this tournament, and we'll save most of it for that video. But what stood out to you that was a little surprising, just from ownership and performance and stuff like that?
I guess the one regret I'm gonna have is I think it'll be the consensus will be Jason Day is back and his ownership won't be as low. And I wish I could have capitalized more on it in the tournaments running up to this. Any other course besides here, I probably would have been a lot heavier on him than DJ, just because he was a great pivot in a vacuum. This is the one course where DJ just had way too much equity to the point where I didn't care about his ownership. But yeah, we'll talk a lot about it more in the lineup review, but it really solidified my kind of thoughts on the equity versus ownership nexus and how to make decisions and all of that. In terms of all the golfers going forward, I don't know, no real surprises across like maybe the top of the landscape across from the one guy that we're going to have to figure out this week because we don't really have a chance to speak kind of what's going on with him. I know there was one basically disastrous hole that made him miss the cut, but I don't know if that's kind of a fluke result or there really are things going on with him that like we need to explain. Now, Pete, have you watched any of him? Like he's in a slump. Like what's your best explanation for what's going on with him?
Switch putters. I mean, I know that's a sign that he's definitely struggling. You know, I guess there's some stuff with his form that people are a little bit worried about, but yeah, this is a tough week for me with golf. So I wasn't able to watch a lot because I was out here in Nevada for the Tiger Jam stuff. So I didn't get to watch much of the tournament, but I did get to see Horschel and Day battle it out down the stretch and the playoffs. So that was fun. But Spieth, there's concerns about the technical aspects of his swing, and it's well documented that he switched putters. So he's definitely searching right now.
And yeah, I mean, Spieth, that's his like go-to thing is that he is an elite player because of his putter. So if that is gone for whatever reason, then obviously that's very concerning for his game. So yeah, we'll definitely get into that just a little bit because he is the defending champion. So on that note, let's pivot into this week's DEAN DeLuca Invitational. Again, this is another Texas course. This one's in Dallas-Fort Worth area at the Colonial Country Club. It has been here for quite a bit. Jordan Spieth, as mentioned, won here last year, minus 17. Pretty good score. Harris English was the runner-up. Chris Kirk, Adam Scott, the previous two winners in 2015 and 2014. Jordan Spieth was a runner-up here in 2015 as well. So again, this is going to be real interesting because despite all of his struggles lately, especially missing the cut last week, you could call his course history very good here. But before we get into specific players, let's kick it to Colin and talk about what sort of players typically perform well here at Colonial. Colin, what you got for us?
It's pretty much driving accuracy, and that's it. I mean, distance gets a little bit of a penalty. Accuracy is the only thing that really pops from year to year. Like GAR and scrambling to a weaker degree, but if you really have to look at a single stat, it's going to be driving accuracy. Keep it simple about your standard level of course fit. No other bells and whistles needed.
Sounds good. Pete, is that pretty consistent with what you know about the course here at Colonial?
Yeah, par 70 is short. So, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. And some of the guys who've done well here are more accuracy guys. So I'm not going to overthink it. I'm going to plug in the accuracy stuff, do some GIR stuff a little bit. There's a tie or feeling really close about some guys. Maybe I'll look at scrambling stats relatively. But, yeah, I think it's really all about driving accuracy.
Awesome. All right. Well, let's get into this tournament and discuss some players. So we do have, it's not exactly star-studded, but we do have some notable names at the top. Jordan Spieth is the highest priced guy. He is at $12,000 on DraftKings. Jon Rahm is right below him at 11.8. Sergio is at 10.8. Paul Casey at 10.2. And then the last guy that is above 10K is Matt Kuchar at 10.1. These guys are very notable ball strikers. So I think it's going to be interesting sort of diving into which guys we prefer here at the top. And especially because a lot of these guys have really nice course history. We talked about Jordan Spieth really being elite. He has a 67.4 course adjusted round in his 4 times here. As mentioned, he was first place last year, 2015. He was second place, had a 14 place in 2014 and 13th, 7th. So I think we could say elite history here. Jon Rahm is the one guy in this field just because he's so young that hasn't played this course before, but a lot of these guys are just in really nice spots to know this course well. Colin, I'll kick to you. just sort of looking through the top guys, it's tough because a lot of these guys really, really play this course well. So it's hard to like find like a stance. I mean, Paul Casey might be the guy that you can eliminate because of his course history here, but the rest of the guys are pretty even as far as fitting the course and playing it well historically.
Yeah, I mean, that being said, like it's not as much of a gap between first and second like last week. It's kind of a more standard distribution. I have Rahm as rating number 1 overall, unsurprisingly, just like given the levels that he's at, and like the rest of the competition doesn't have much to offer. Spieth is struggling. Sergio has some history here, but kind of fits it nicely. But like no one else measures up to his overall talent level right now. I agree that, like, I mean, Paul Casey's history dings him a little bit. It's like Kuchar's kind of in the same boat where it's not great history, but it kind of sets up nicely for him. I'm kind of a little bit more bearish on both, especially at their price. But like, yeah, the top 3 price guys, they're close to one another, but it's tough to figure out what to do with them. I'm particularly interested in what's going on with Spieth and why he's struggling, because this does set up as an accuracy course. And if you look at models, his recent driving accuracy is kind of dipping below his average. So I know he's switching putters, but I'm going to have to look a little bit more to figure out like if his struggles are accuracy related. And it is going to be a windy day, or a windy, definitely Thursday, Friday this week. I really don't know what to do with him, because that's what happens. Like, what do you do when recent struggles meet great course history?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of looking at the average out so far. From a game theory perspective, I think people are going to prefer Rahm strongly to Spieth this week. So I'm almost inclined to take Spieth just for that reason. I'm sure Pete has Rahm and Spieth and Sergio are really close to one another. So I don't know. How's it breaking down for you as far as like deciding between the 3?
Well, I definitely have Rahm number 1 by a good margin. One more shout out to Tiger Jam. We got to hang with Wesley Bryan quite a bit, and he talked about the most impressive player that he's played with, and he thinks Rahm is the guy, and he will be number 1 in the world here soon. So that kind of cemented what you've been talking about. And definitely to hear him say that. Spieth, I like, but I think people are going to be on him because he's going to be touted so much this week. So I'm sure Rahm will probably be a little bit more heavily owned, but I still think Spieth, even with his recent struggles, will be way up there, especially with the Dallas angle, the course history angle, and other people trying to get sneaky in terms of ownership. They might think that he might be a little lower owned. So I think that he will end up being somewhere up there, and I'm probably leaning Rahm overall out of those guys.
Give me an over-under. I don't know. You don't think that the struggles are manifest and people are going to be – I don't know. Like, give me an over-under for ownership.
20%.
I would take the under.
Really?
I think people are strongly going to prefer Rahm.
I think 20% is a good line.
I would take under 18 if you took over.
Yeah, I think I might take over on 18.
All right, there. All right, now we got a line. I'll still take under.
Okay.
That's interesting. Yeah, so I guess the question really, and this is the tough part, is you sort of have to figure out what you're going to do with Spieth in your lineups. That's sort of the question number 1. I think we all agree that Rahm is definitely a good play, but he does have that poor Friday round from the players. Pete, is that something that you're willing to just throw out and say, he's allowed to have one bad round and the rest of his play recently is just so good it doesn't matter, or does that concern you a little bit?
Yeah, his Saturday awful round where he had the MDF was really painful, but I don't care. I think that it's one round, and yeah, he's going to bounce back. I mean, if he throws up a couple more bad rounds, to start this, maybe I'll start looking into it. But as of now, it's one round. That course can be just absolutely penalized and insulting. So I'm just chalking it up to such an anomaly relative to the rest of the rounds that we've seen from him on the PGA Tour. So I'm going to continue to roster Rahm and hope that it works out.
That's fair enough. All right, so we do have interesting dynamic here. The top 3 golfers are all interesting in their own right. Spieth with his history and won it last year. Rahm might be the best golfer in the world, and Sergio is just about as hot as any golfer in 2017. Those guys are definitely going to soak up a lot of the ownership. Colin, in order to be contrarian, what are you doing here? Are you pivoting down to maybe taking a chance on Paul Casey. I mean, he doesn't have great history, but he also hasn't played it that much, so maybe it's a small sample. Are you going down to Kuchar? Zach Johnson is a two-time winner here, right below them at 9-8. How are you getting contrarian away from those chalky three top guys?
If you, at least for this field, like I don't think if you drop down below the top three, I think you're still giving up too much equity here because there's no one that stands out that like will give you enough back. Like Paul Casey's decent, but I think he's clearly a tier below. And then like, oh man, am I bearish on Kuchar, Zach Johnson, Webb Simpson? Just like I don't think that anybody below Casey is remotely justifying their price. I think you're gonna. I think you have to do it by just picking some flyers and just like really honing in on some of the like sub 5% like own people to really differentiate your lineup. So not the week to go contrarian at the top, I don't think.
Interesting. Yeah. So maybe be chalky with those top three guys and then be contrarian with some of your lower picks.
Yeah. There's nothing you can do. You just need that level of equity, I think.
Yeah. Pete, what are your thoughts on that? Are you willing to take some chances on the Casey Kuchar ZJ range, or are you, like Colin, going to maybe get contrarian with some of your like lower guys?
Yeah, I'm going to get contrarian with the lower guys, and I actually like some of the guys who are actually, in the high 8s, low 9s range. I think there's a lot of guys that are really interesting, even into the mid to high 9s, like Kevin Kisner. I think you can start lineups with him and build more balanced lineups if you want to go away from the studs at the top.
Cool. All right. Well, let's jump into that then. Pete, I'll kick it right back to you. We know that those studs at the top are going to be chalky, but who are some of the guys in the 7-8K range that you think are going to be chalky guys to pair with them?
So you are the chalky guys in the 7 to 8K range?
Yeah, and then we'll talk about some pivots away from those in tournaments.
I think that Brian Harmon might be somewhat popular. I really like Emiliano Grillo. I hope that he's not super popular, but I imagine that he will be, given that he's shown some recent form and he does really fit this course. Lucas Glover is starting to get more popular, even though he still can't putt relatively. I think he'll be somewhat popular. Steve Stricker, if you're going to go accuracy, I mean, the guy's old, but he's still playing extremely well. He could be somewhat popular in that range. Colin, what do you think?
All right. So there are two chalk picks that I basically agree with, Adam Hadwin and Jason Duffner, who are always chalk, seemingly from week to week because they're right in this price range. And they have like pretty good course history. So I think they're the easy chalk calls for like the mid, like especially in the upper range. The one I wanted to talk about this week, because I apparently am at war with the rest of the world, is Bud Cauley, who is all the way at 9,500 this week.
Yeah, he's pricey.
I think he's going to be just as chalky. Well, I mean, we'll talk about it a little bit later, but this is chalk that I don't understand. Yes, there have been really good results in the past 3 tournaments or so. Yes, he got touted a bunch. But, like, you look at his long-term log, and it's just I don't see where the hype is, and I'm wondering – and I've always been, like, missing stuff. So I don't know. Like, I get it, but I don't get it. Like, can someone defend Bud Cauley for me here? Because I am just on the wrong page with everybody else here.
He's just been so good lately, man. People are recency biased, and he's super talented. So I think that's the reason that people want to be on him. But yeah, look at his game log. It's just been the last 3 times he's top 10 every time. So I think that's why people are on him. Obviously, he had 2 missed cuts before that, but yeah, his price tag is really caught up now. I've been playing him a bunch on FanDuel, put him a little bit on DraftKings, and it looks like the price tag kind of taking him out of being a core play, even though he has been so good recently. But yeah, I prefer Kevin Kisner over him by a good margin.
I mean, so it's not just like the 2 missed cuts before that, though. Like, I mean, and maybe this is a consequence of focusing so much on a long-term adjusted round. Starting this year in November, he started the year with 4 straight missed cuts, banked to 3rd, and just has this middling mix of missed cuts and nothing higher than a 27th. If that's the long-term form, like 3 top 10s doesn't erase that in a snap to get him to 9,500. Like, Is there some, so this is the age old question, like, is this a perma turnaround? Did he figure something out? The only thing that's changed in his stats, as far as I can see, is his putting got a lot better by like a stroke around. But if you believe that that's the most like luck induced stat, then why is this a permanent change? Why does everyone believe that he's like suddenly different than just the miscut machine he was in November?
Yeah, it seems like a hot putter to me, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely like, people are going to still be on him. Like, I didn't think I was missing anything with this week, even with his finish. I don't think I'd be missing anything. Y'all can have your Collie. I don't get it.
I probably won't have it. This price tag is just too high.
9.5 is crazy. Yeah. What are our thoughts, Pete? I'll kick to you on this one. Billy Horschel, obviously coming off the win. And if we're just talking recency bias, he's in that range, like right next to Grillo. So an interesting range where you could maybe pivot to one of these guys or the other. But I'm curious what your thoughts on ownership will be for him after looking pretty good last week.
Yeah, I mean, I preferred Grillo, but and normally I fade the previous week winner, but it was cool to see him win. And I think Colin was higher on Horschel than most, so congrats on that, Colin. And yeah, I think that he's a fine play, but I prefer Grillo personally.
Yeah, Colin.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I mean, like, I was higher on Horschel. I wish I had some of him for like that when I've been kind of like, have some of my convictions. But yeah, I think his ownership is going to be a little high. Like, there's going to be some people I prefer. I mean, it's fine, but I think it'll be a little bit too chalky for my tastes.
Definitely fair. Okay, so let's talk about some other guys here that could be some pivots. Some guys that have really, really nice course history, and we haven't mentioned yet. So I'm sort of curious where you guys think ownership is going to be. Chris Kirk 8.2, Ryan Palmer at 7.9. Maybe not saying that too much as far as like a course fit, but if you look at their actual history here, it's pretty solid. Colin, what are your thoughts on those two guys this week?
So there's one guy I want to throw basically in the same boat for the same reason, and that's Bryan Snedeker. Okay. I mean, decent, like, he's cheap price tag, good history. And yeah, I'm really curious on how people are going to like start picking them. I think Palmer's going to be the most popular of the three at that price tag, and people are just always high in Palmer. I think you're going to get the Texas angle talked up a lot. Snedeker is a more interesting one because there is a known injury issue here. And I don't know enough if it's like the reason for his struggles, missed the cut last week, are injury related or not. I don't know if this course that's been good to him has that kind of revival potential. And Chris Kirk is someone who just has been like, no one's mentioned all year. That's definitely a price tag jump for him, but I think has the best course history in the field relative to his ability. And I'm wondering how much people are going to hone in on that. So it's kind of three different, I mean, if there's one thing that I'm pretty clear on of the three, it's probably going to be fade Palmer because I think he jumps above 15% ownership. But I really am going to have to figure out what to do with the other two because their ownership is going to be right in that range where it's going to be enticing. So, Pete, what do you think of those three, the course history guys?
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right in terms of how the ownership is going to break down. Palmer also a Texas guy, so I think that that's going to boost his ownership. So I'm going to be probably on Kirk the most out of those guys. I'm curious where his ownership ends up, but I really think he's a nice price. You can definitely make some balanced rosters where you have a lot of guys in this range. So I don't mind doing that and just fading the guys at the top, especially since I think Rahm and Spieth are going to be so heavily owned. I think that kind of the nail on the head there in terms of how people are going to be thinking. So I do expect Ryan Palmer to be a really popular target this week.
Fair enough. One thing I want to mention is that in our player models, this is something that I've been looking at a little bit more. We have a couple new columns that are form differential. So you can look at players, the difference between their GIR in the recent form in long-term form, and also adjusted round. So guys who have been outperforming their long-term marks, definitely Bud Cauley, we just mentioned. Siwoo Kim, Nick Taylor, some of these, Sung Kang, who is chalky last week for sure. And then if we switch it and look at guys who have been a lot worse than what their long-term data suggests, we have guys like Harris English, who actually I wanted to discuss with Colin, because Colin is definitely a Harris English guy. Been really, really bad.
I'm going to cut. Sorry to interrupt, but keep going. All right.
Okay. No, but he's been really bad lately. If you just look at his game log, 4 straight missed cuts. He's missed 5 out of his last 6. Just been brutal, but really good course history, 7-3. Colin, I mean, where do you, at like what point do you, are you willing to take a golfer and, like you mentioned with Jason Day, like get ahead of the field on an upswing, like a regression back to the mean?
I mean, like it depends on the golfer, because, not all swings are created equal. I think with someone like Jason Day, like, at least you have the backstop of, like, you've seen him scorch earth, and that there's just like there's just an explosion of a payoff waiting. With someone like Harris English, like, I mean, he's always been kind of like that solid mid-range play type of thing, but like, I don't know. Like, there are plenty of guys with great course history that are just falling off a cliff, that it's like, all right, like if you're a mid-range guy or just like some like tour mainstay, like I don't feel like I'm losing a lot, just especially if you've fallen off a cliff. That's a long way of saying I don't mind passing on Harris English. It's just too far a fall from grace for me.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair. If you look at why he's been so bad, it's just been accuracy. He just hasn't been able to hit really any fairways. He really hasn't been able to hit any greens, which if this is an accuracy course, that's obviously concerning. So, Pete, I'm curious your thoughts. Like, when you're trying to get on the upswing of a player, take them maybe a week or two early as they're starting to regress towards the mean. Are you looking at golfers, like why they're performing bad, like whether a guy's performing bad just because he's getting unlucky with his putter, or whether he's just being a bad ball striker? Or do you like look into specific stats like that?
Sorry, is that to me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I do try to look at that stuff as much as possible. I think the biggest thing when you're trying to figure out what's happening to people is looking at the putter. If someone's been running really hot and then all of a sudden they're running really cold, that makes a lot of sense because there's so much short-term variance in putting. Outside of that, and then I start looking at ball striking, and I really try to look at GIR stats. If someone's really fallen off in that regard, I think that there's a lot of value potentially in fading them, and also, regressing in a positive way. Someone shows me for like a month straight that they're just hitting way more greens than they have historically and are more accurate, I definitely am more likely to buy that versus the Colin example where he's just making a lot more putts. So that's kind of my philosophy on it, and curious Colin's thoughts.
Yeah, that's pretty much almost like your check down process of like what's variance and what's what's due to luck. I mean, the one thing that like we didn't mention that like I think is the most stable by far is just, I mean, it's almost like the inverse of that is like driving distance, because it's the only thing that is essentially consistent and like repeatable from week to week. So like that's almost like a nice backstop. It's why people like DJ just always like rate super high, and not just because they're the number one, but driving distance is something that like doesn't fluctuate a whole lot. So it's something that you can like essentially anchor your decisions around.
Yeah. That's very fair. Last guy I want to talk about before we get out of here and pick some winners. Phil Mickelson, interesting guy. He's been pretty good, but if you're sort of looking at driving accuracy, not a guy who rates very well. He hasn't really been super accurate in terms of hitting fairways in the long term, and has been a little bit down. He's obviously been putting pretty well, and he's performed well in 2017. Hasn't played this course in 2010, so according to our models, which is just past 5 years, he has no history. And yet he has some of the highest ownership. He's around 17-20% in our models right now. Colin, is that just a fact of these guys with big names just are owned no matter sort of what's happening?
Yeah, everybody kind of has, like, every golfer has their individual kind of ownership quirks. I think people are just like, Phil's a popular guy. There's no way around that. And yeah, there's a household name factor for sure, but those are the exact type of edges that we're looking to exploit when we're setting lineups. So yeah, I think it's just not a name recognition thing.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, it is interesting. If you just look at sort by projected ownership in our models, there's not a guy like DJ that just stands out as definitely the chalk of the slate like he did last week. Rom will probably be very popular, but overall, it's definitely spread out. So definitely going to be an interesting week for sure. Let's pick some winners. We will go just any guy, and then we will go below 9K, I think would be a nice cutoff. I think any of you guys, either of you guys want to go first?
Yeah, I haven't gone first in a while, so I think I'm due up here. And I think I picked the week to do it because I'm going Rom.
Pete, you want to go second?
Sure. Give me Sergio.
Okay. I don't want to, but I guess I have to go Spieth. All right, and then below 9K, let's see here. I will go Hadwin. Pete, back to you.
On 1 second here.
Sure.
Let's see here. So I below 9K?
Below 9K, yeah. Duffner's right at 9K.
I know, that's why I wanted to freaking take him.
Yeah.
I'll take Grillo that's my guy.
Wondering what took so long.
Yeah, I thought you would go Grillo.
Yeah. And then I'll go with the guy we haven't talked about, but is definitely due playing well, Pat Perez.
Pat Perez
is a great pick. I screwed that up. Pat Perez is a great pick.
Yeah, we didn't even talk. Colin, why is he 7'6"?
I've never understood that all year.
Pat Perez is 7'6", and Bud Cauley is 9'5".
Yeah, where's the justice in this world? I agree.
Yeah, that is surprising. The difference between those guys is not $2,000 on DraftKings. So that's very interesting. Cool. We will end it there. Again, we're doing a video right after this. It'll be out shortly on Tuesday afternoon, probably maybe Tuesday early evening. We're going to break down some of our lineups from last week. So definitely check out that. Good luck this week in the DEAN DELUCA Invitational, and we will talk to you guys next week.